Imagine being told to leave your seat, not because of anything you did, but simply because of how you look. Noah Bennett, an 11-year-old boy dressed neatly in a blazer, had a valid boarding pass for first class on a flight from Charlotte to Portland. Yet a flight attendant told him, "This seat isn't for people like you." The quiet dignity with which Noah accepted this cruel injustice soon gave way to something far bigger than just one child's experience. 15 minutes later, his father, Darius Bennett, a calm, powerful CEO with control over the airline's parent company, arrived. Not with anger, but with a folder in hand and a command that would freeze the flight, rewrite policy, and force an entire system to confront its biases. Who is Darius Bennett? What is this mysterious clause he invoked that stunned the crew and passengers? How does one boy's calm strength ignite a reckoning with systemic discrimination on an airplane thousands of feet above the ground? This is more than a story about a seat. It's about belonging, dignity, and the courage to stay in your place when the world tries to push you out. If you want to hear the full story of how Noah and Darius changed everything, hit like, share this video, and subscribe now. Let's begin. The cabin lights were soft and golden. Outside the small oval window, the sun still clung to the edge of the horizon, brushing the tarmac in warm amber. The smell of leather seats, recycled air, and just a hint of citrus cleaner floated in the cabin. First class on North Continental Flight 441 from Charlotte to Portland wasn't busy yet. Only 5 passengers had boarded. Noah Bennett had never flown first class before, but he didn't fidget. He didn't swing his legs or press every button on the screen. He simply walked down the aisle the way his father taught him, shoulders back. Quiet steps, eyes forward. He wore a navy blazer one size too big, sleeves slightly brushing his knuckles. His dress shirt was crisp. The bow tie at his collar was burgundy, slightly off-center, but full of care. His shoes, polished the night before with a tiny brush, gleamed under the overhead lights. He stopped at seat 2A, glanced at his boarding pass, and looked again. Then he sat, slowly, carefully, like the seat might break if he moved too fast. He placed his leather backpack under the seat in front of him. It was brown with soft corners, the initials NB stitched in gold. He folded his hands in his lap and looked out the window. The sky looked like his dad's office during sunset. A voice approached. "Excuse me." Noah turned. The woman standing before him wore the uniform of North Continental crisp dark slacks, a tailored vest, and a perfectly pinned name tag. Her hair was pulled tightly into a bun. Her face didn't smile. "This seat is for first-class passengers only." Noah blinked once. I know. This is my seat." She tilted her head. "Barely. Can I see your boarding pass?" He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out the carefully folded sheet. She didn't say thank you when she took it, just scanned it with a frown. The corners of her mouth pulled tight. "And where are your parents?" Noah hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because something about her tone made him feel like the answer might be wrong. "My dad is meeting me in Portland. I flew out to see my aunt." She narrowed her eyes. "I'm going to verify this. Just sit tight." She didn't hand the pass back. She walked toward the galley. Noah turned slowly toward the window again. His fingers curled slightly on his lap. His throat felt dry. A man across the aisle lowered his magazine. Another woman looked up from her phone. No one said anything. Someone whispered from row 3. Did she just tell him to prove he belongs? Noah didn't hear it, but he could feel the weight in the air, like something invisible had shifted. He was used to it, in a way. Not this. Not being in first class, but the looks, the assumptions, the feeling of being stared at just a beat too long. The hallway glances at school. The mall security guard's gaze lingering when he walked in with his backpack. He'd once asked his dad, "Why do people look at me like I'm not supposed to be somewhere?" His dad had crouched down, looked him in the eye, and said, "That's not your weight to carry. That's theirs." The woman returned with another flight attendant, younger, with softer eyes and a clipboard in hand. The first attendant handed over the pass. "This the kid?" The younger one nodded, then crouched beside Noah's seat. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" "Noah. Noah Bennett. And you printed this ticket?" "I booked it with my dad. He told me to be early and polite." The older attendant let out a tight chuckle. "Should have told him to sit and coach," she muttered. The younger attendant looked up sharply, then down again. Noah felt something twist in his stomach, like he'd done something wrong but couldn't figure out what. The first attendant. Tracy. He read her name tag, straightened, and cleared her throat. "Mr. Bennett? I'm sorry, but this boarding pass isn't valid for this section. But I already passed through the gate. They scanned it." She shook her head. "That was a mistake. Please gather your belongings and follow me. You'll be seated in the rear cabin." Noah looked around. No one stood. No one said a word. He stood slowly, reached for his bag, and glanced at the window one more time. He tried not to blink too hard. Tried not to let his face show anything. "Can I call my dad first?" "No. Phone's off. He's likely already in the air." Someone in 3B turned their phone camera on. Quietly. The lens pointed toward the aisle. A girl across from Noah removed her headphones and leaned into the aisle. "This doesn't feel right," she whispered. But still, no one stood. Tracy led Noah past the rows of suited adults, tablet-tapping executives, and passengers who suddenly found their tray tables fascinating. One man made brief eye contact, then looked away. When they reached the curtain that separated first from economy, Noah's phone buzzed silently in his pocket. He stopped walking. "Is there a problem?" Tracy snapped. Noah looked at the screen. His heart lifted. "My dad just landed." "You can text him from your new seat," she said. Noah didn't move. Behind them, the girl in the hoodie was now live streaming. The comment bubble started filling. "Why are they moving the kid? This is wild. Someone call his dad." In the cockpit, Captain Mitchell Crane turned toward the commotion. "Problem: unauthorized minor in first. Fake boarding pass." Noah didn't flinch. "It's not fake." The pilot walked out. "Let's all stay calm. There's no shame in flying coach." "Son." That's when the intercom crackled. Gate 14. Passenger escort approaching the jet bridge. Security protocol flagged. The gate agent's headset beeped. She looked up and froze. A man in a charcoal gray suit was approaching the aircraft, escorted by 2 uniformed airline staff. He moved like someone who didn't need to explain who he was. Broad shoulders, neatly cropped beard, calm, focused eyes, a briefcase in one hand. The girl in the hoodie whispered into her live stream, "Yo, that's the kid's dad. And he looks like he owns the plane." And from the way the jet bridge went still, maybe he did. The air inside the cabin felt heavier now. Noah stood still at the edge of the aisle, just behind the curtain that separated first class from the rest of the plane. His fingers clutched the leather strap of his backpack. He had not moved since the last buzz from his phone. That one vibration had made his heart beat faster, not from fear, but hope. His father had landed. Tracy Halston crossed her arms. Her voice was firm, but there was a faint edge of discomfort now. "Mr. Bennett, I need you to follow me to the rear cabin. You're holding up boarding." Noah didn't reply right away. He looked over his shoulder, toward the front. Seat 2A was still empty. His seat. He looked down at the floor, then back at her. "Can I please just sit there until my dad calls me back?" Tracy's expression hardened. "I've already told you. That seat is reserved. If you don't comply, I will need to escalate this." The word escalate lingered like smoke in the air. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably. One man reached overhead for a bag he did not need. A woman faked a cough. The girl with the headphones had not stopped streaming. Her live stream count was over 700 now. In the video, the comments were climbing faster than she could read them. Why's he standing there alone? Did she just say escalate to a child? Where's his dad? At the front of the plane. Captain Mitchell Crane spoke quietly into his radio. "We've got a hold at Gate 14. Something about a protocol flag." His co-pilot raised an eyebrow. Protocol flag. The captain didn't answer. He was watching the monitor near the jet bridge. A figure was now visible through the terminal window, walking with a calm stride, flanked by airline staff. Every few seconds, someone stepped aside to let him pass. Passengers on the plane began to notice. Tracy looked back and frowned. "What is the holdup now?" The gate agent's voice cracked through the intercom again. "Attention crew on Flight 4401. Please pause boarding. Executive escort has reached the aircraft, awaiting identification confirmation." Noah finally took a small step forward, then another, but not toward the rear. He stepped back into first class. Tracy's voice rose sharply. "Excuse me, you cannot go back there." Noah looked up at her. His voice was quiet but steady. "That's my seat." And then, like a wave, the cabin went still. A sound of footsteps echoed on the jet bridge. Not fast, not urgent, just deliberate, confident. The figure stepped through the cabin door. Darius Bennett did not look like a man in a rush. He wore a charcoal gray suit, tailored to precision, with a deep blue shirt beneath. His watch gleamed faintly under the lights. A slim briefcase hung at his side. He took 3 steps forward, scanned the aisle, saw his son. Noah's face did not break into a smile. He didn't run. He just looked up, relieved and quiet. Darius placed one hand on his son's shoulder. "I got your message," he said softly. Then he turned. "Who removed my son from his seat?" No one answered right away. Tracy stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Sir, there appears to have been a mix-up. The boarding pass wasn't matching our manifest, and we have procedures." She trailed off. Darius's gaze didn't waver. He did not raise his voice. He did not scowl. He simply opened the clasp on his briefcase and pulled out a small black folder with a silver crest embossed at the corner. He handed it to her. "I believe you'll want to read that." Tracy hesitated. She took the folder, opened it slowly. Her eyes moved across the page, then stopped, then moved again. Behind her, Alyssa Reed peeked over the top corner. Her breath caught. Darius turned to the captain, who had now stepped forward. "Captain Crane?" The captain nodded cautiously. "Yes, sir. I'm invoking Clause 17.6 of your Executive Flight Compliance Manual. Immediate governance review for discriminatory incident involving a minor." The silence was total. Tracy blinked. "I'm sorry." "Clause what, 17.6? Darius repeated, his voice calm. "Drafted and approved under shareholder agreement with ArcLight Capital Partners. current holders of 22.4% of North Continental Aviation Holdings. A murmur rolled through first class. In row 3, a woman whispered, "He owns part of the airline." A man across from her pulled out his phone and started typing. Captain Crane swallowed. "Sir, I wasn't aware of I know." Darius interrupted. "That's the problem." Noah looked up at his dad. The man didn't look angry. He looked tired. Like this wasn't the first time. Like he'd prepared for this moment. Tracy clutched the folder a little tighter. I didn't know." "You didn't check?" Darius replied. "That's different." From the rear of the plane, a faint chime rang, then another. The onboard notification system lit up on the captain's screen. A message from Operations HQ. Flight 441. Executive escalation confirmed. Immediate hold requested. The pilot looked back at Darius. His hand moved away from the throttle. Darius stepped forward. "To be clear," he said to the crew, "I am not requesting compensation. I am not demanding an apology. What I am doing is ensuring that my son and every child who looks like him will never again be told they don't belong before they've even spoken." Noah closed his eyes. It wasn't embarrassment he felt. It was something heavier. A kind of sadness he didn't know how to name, because part of him already knew this was always coming. His dad squeezed his shoulder. "Go on," he said. "Take your seat." Noah returned to seat 2A, gently set his bag back under the seat. The same spot, the same seat. Only now, the entire plane knew it was his. Noah sat in seat 2A again. This time, the silence around him was not the same. It was heavier. It was uncomfortable, and it wasn't his. The air in first class had changed. Like everyone had inhaled at once and forgotten how to let it go. Nobody made eye contact with the boy in the navy blazer now. Nobody offered a smile. Not the man in 1C, who had casually scrolled past the entire moment just 10 minutes earlier. Not the woman across the aisle who had once glanced at him and blinked like he had been in the wrong movie. Now they just stared straight ahead, pretending to read, pretending to scroll, pretending to exist anywhere but here. Noah folded his hands neatly in his lap. He looked out the window. The plane still hadn't moved. The tarmac crew was paused. The luggage cart sat idle near the back wheels. He could see one of the ground agents speaking into a headset, glancing toward the cockpit nervously. From the corner of his eye, Noah spotted the girl with the hoodie and headphones. She hadn't stopped streaming. Her phone was propped discreetly on her tray, angled toward the aisle, and her eyes flicked back and forth across the cabin like she didn't want to miss a frame. The live stream was now at over 2,300 viewers. The comments rolled fast. "Is this real? I would have walked off if I saw that. This is why we need more dads." Like that man Darius Bennett stood just a few feet ahead, still in the aisle. He hadn't sat down. He hadn't said another word. He didn't need to. He was watching everything. Tracy Halston, the lead flight attendant, stood near the galley, back ramrod straight, arms at her sides. She kept glancing toward the cockpit, then toward Darius, then back again. Her hands twitched once, then stilled. She didn't speak. She didn't dare. Alyssa Reed stood beside her. Younger, quieter. She looked down at her shoes like they held answers. Her fingers kept brushing the edge of her service tablet. But she didn't tap anything. Not yet. Captain Mitchell Crane remained in the cockpit, radio in hand. His voice was low but urgent, speaking to someone in operations who had gone unusually quiet. "What do you mean, hold for review?" He pressed the button again. "This is a time-sensitive route." The voice on the other end came back after several seconds. "Sir, We advise full cooperation. This flight has triggered executive protocol under Section 7 compliance review. All crew actions are being logged. All cockpit feeds are live. Please stand by. Captain Crane did not reply. He didn't need to. The silence spoke for him. In 2A, Noah adjusted his bow tie. It had shifted slightly. His fingers trembled as he reached up to fix it, then stopped halfway. His throat tightened. He hadn't cried. Not when they made him leave his seat, not when they took his pass, not even when Tracy had spoken to him like he didn't belong on the plane his father helped fund. But now, sitting still while everyone avoided looking at him, was harder than any of it. He pressed his lips together, and still, he said nothing. Across the aisle, a businessman pulled out his phone and typed into a search bar, Darius Bennett, net worth the wine. The first article popped up instantly. CEO of ArcLight Capital, asset portfolio exceeding $18 billion, infrastructure, logistics, energy, aviation. The man swallowed and turned off the screen quickly. In the rear cabin, passengers were beginning to murmur. They had been watching the front section for nearly 10 minutes. One man leaned over to his wife. Did they just pause the whole flight? Who's the guy in the suit? Up front. Darius finally took a breath, then turned. He looked at Tracy. She flinched. I'm not here to embarrass you, he said. His voice was soft, clear. But I want you to remember this moment. Because what happened here isn't new. It's just visible now. She opened her mouth, closed it. He turned to Alyssa. Who filed the seat manifest? Alyssa hesitated. I did. Did you cross-reference for minors? She nodded faintly. Then why did no one pause before removing a child from a seat assigned to his name? Alyssa looked at Tracy. I didn't have the authority to stop it, she whispered. Darius didn't react. He looked down the aisle. Not accusingly, not with fury, but like a teacher who already knew the answer and simply waited for the others to catch up. In row 3, the girl with the live stream lowered her phone just a bit. He's not even mad, she whispered to her audience. He just looks like he's tired of being the only one who has to explain things. Her comments exploded. I feel that he's carrying a whole generation on his shoulders right now. The captain emerged from the cockpit again. Mr. Bennett, he said quietly, we've received a second flag from HQ. Legal wants to review all audio logs and camera feeds before we proceed. I've been instructed to hold departure. I apologize. Darius nodded once. Thank you, Captain. He walked to seat 2B and sat for the first time. Noah glanced at him. Their eyes met. Darius gave a faint nod. You're doing fine. Noah nodded back. A breath finally escaped his lungs. Outside the plane, the sun had dropped behind a line of clouds. Inside, everything was still. And finally, the eyes that had once looked away were starting to look back. The hum of the terminal had quieted. Not completely. Just enough for the tension to settle into the air like static. The people at Gate 14 were no longer scrolling on their phones or checking the time. They were watching the jet bridge, waiting for something, or maybe for someone. Inside the gate office, a regional supervisor stood stiffly behind the counter. Her name badge read Evelyn Grant. She had worked at North Continental Airlines for 12 years and had never seen a code freeze on a domestic route without a mechanical issue. Her headset buzzed again. Inbound directive from legal, she muttered. Live incident flagged. Protocol 17.6 in effect. The aircraft cannot move until audit review initiates. She looked up. Across the glass wall, she could see the plane, still docked, still sealed. A faint shadow of a tall man was visible in the first row. Even from here, Evelyn could sense something unusual about the way the aircraft had gone still. It was not mechanical. It was personal. Down the jet bridge. The doors slid open once more. A woman in a black pantsuit stepped through, tablet in one hand, communication earpiece in the other. She moved fast, but not with panic. She moved like someone sent to clean up a mess that had gone public before the higher-ups even realized what happened. Ms. Kelsey Hartman, Special Liaison for Corporate Governance at North Continental. The moment she stepped onto the carpet, Evelyn approached. Ma'am, who authorized Hartman, cut her off gently. This is above regional. I am cleared under executive escalation from ArcLight Capital. She showed her badge. The logo gleamed. ArcLight. A few feet behind her, a younger agent trailed with 2 black cases, one for recording equipment, the other for document retrieval. Evelyn stepped back. Understood, she said, barely audible. Back inside the aircraft. Noah adjusted his posture. He wasn't sure if he should slouch like other kids did or sit straight like his dad taught him. He stayed somewhere in the middle, balanced, quiet. Across the aisle, passengers still refused to speak. One woman had tears in her eyes, and she did not know why. Another man kept glancing at the boy and then looking away, as if ashamed of something he never said. In 2B. Darius tapped once on the screen embedded in the seat in front of him. The flight details blinked. Boarding status held. Compliance audit pending. Crew review active. He opened his briefcase again and pulled out a slim silver device, like a tablet, but unmarked. The surface lit up with a biometric scan. He accessed a dashboard labeled Internal Incident Mapping ArcLight Aviation Division. He found the flight number, 441. He tapped once. Under Incident Type, he selected Discrimination Flag Minor Passenger. Live audit feed enabled. Back at the gate, Kelsey Hartman stepped onto the plane. The moment she crossed the threshold, her expression changed. She spotted Darius, walked forward. Sir, she said, we are in position. Audit is live. Legal is monitoring remotely. Darius nodded. You have the incident log. She held out her tablet. He reviewed it, the timestamps, the witness markers, the flight attendant roster. He glanced toward the galley where Tracy still stood, eyes forward, shoulders squared like a soldier trying not to flinch. Kelsey continued, would you like to proceed here or move to Terminal Lounge? Here is fine. Very well. She turned toward the captain, who had come out again. Captain Crane, I am here on behalf of ArcLight Capital, representing the governance board. All crew actions from gate to cabin have been placed under review. Please ensure compliance. The captain's jaw flexed. Understood. He returned to the cockpit without further word. Passengers looked at each other, uncertain now if they were part of a normal flight or an unfolding policy case study. The girl in row 3 with the live stream tapped her screen. Over 5,000 watching. She whispered into the mic. You guys, this is corporate level now. I think something's about to go down. I mean, like real accountability level. She tilted the phone to capture Noah again. He had not moved, and yet he was the center of gravity. Kelsey stepped back, stood near the cockpit. Darius slowly stood. He turned to face the first 3 rows. What happened here may seem like a small moment, he said. Just a child being told to move seats. Just a misunderstanding. Just a policy misread. But that is how bias survives. Not in explosions, but in small, unquestioned habits. His voice was calm, even, but it carried through the cabin like thunder rolling far off in the distance. He looked toward Tracy. You may not have meant harm, but you acted from assumption, and that assumption caused harm." She clenched her fingers behind her back. He turned to the passengers now. "Every single one of you saw it. Some of you looked away. Some of you recorded. Some of you whispered. But no one asked why a child was being removed from a seat with his name on it. No one questioned why a black boy in a blazer was treated like a trespasser. Not until now the words were not angry, but they did not leave space for excuses. A passenger in row 2C bowed her head. A man in 1D put away his phone. Darius walked slowly back to his seat. This is not about punishment. This is about policy and what we tolerate in silence. He sat again. Noah looked over Dad. "Yes. Why do people have to be reminded that I belong?" Darius didn't answer immediately. He looked at his son, then past him, out the window. "Because systems forget on purpose," he said, "and it's up to us to make them remember." Noah nodded slowly. The first sincere one he'd given all day, and for the first time since he boarded, he leaned back, let his shoulders relax. The jet bridge buzzed softly again, but this time no one moved. They were all waiting, not for departure but for change. Darius Bennett had sat in silence for nearly 5 minutes. He was not a man who liked attention. He did not enjoy the spotlight. His strength came not from volume, but from velocity. Everything he did moved with purpose, quietly and fully aimed. Now, his purpose sat beside him in seat 2A. A boy in a blazer, a son who had done nothing wrong, a child forced to carry the assumptions of adults who never stopped to ask a single question. The hum of the air vents was the only sound left in first class. Darius leaned slightly forward in his seat. He tapped once on the tablet in his lap. A secure screen opened, encrypted and real time. He typed a single word, "Proceed," in the rear galley. Alyssa Reed felt her tablet buzz. She looked down. New access level granted. Audit view mode active. Her eyes widened. Tracy Halston, standing at the service counter, turned sharply. "What was that?" Alyssa said nothing. She could feel it now. Whatever had started as a passenger dispute was no longer about one seat. This was corporate, structural, bigger than either of them. In the cockpit, Captain Mitchell Crane received his third communication in less than 2 minutes. Audit activation verified. Security liaison en route. Hold departure and restrict all passenger movement until instructed otherwise. He rubbed his temple. In 17 years of flying, he had dealt with medical emergencies, fuel alerts, and even a full bird strike over the Rockies. But he had never been told to hold for an equity audit mid-boarding. He glanced at his co-pilot. "Just fly the plane," Mitchell the man muttered. "Except we are not flying out in the aisle." Darius stood. He walked back to the front of the cabin, where the curtains separated first class from coach. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a different folder. This one was thinner. It held only 3 pages. One white, one gray, one dark blue with a seal pressed into the top right corner. He placed the pages gently on the empty folding tray in front of him. The cabin watched. No one spoke. Even the tapping in the live stream girl's phone stopped. Darius turned to face the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we take off, there's something you need to understand." He tapped the screen in front of his seat. A chime echoed softly through the cabin as the public address system connected to his voice. "I know you did not come here for a speech. I know you have places to be, plans made, lives to live, but so do we. My son and I boarded this plane like any other passenger. We had tickets. We arrived early. We followed every rule. And yet, he was removed from his seat without cause because someone assumed he did not belong." Darius looked down at the papers. This first document is the passenger manifest. My son's name is listed. Seat 2A, age 11. Confirmed by ticket number and ID. He tapped again. The cabin screen above the galley lit up. A magnified version of the manifest appeared. Several passengers sat back, surprised. The second document is a shareholder notice. My firm, ArcLight Capital, holds over 22% of this airline's parent company, under Clause 17.6. We reserve the right to halt operations and initiate executive review when a violation of dignity, policy, or passenger rights is witnessed involving a minor. He paused. That review has already begun. The final page showed a seal with 5 interlocking lines. Internal Oversight Division. Darius let the documents rest. I do not seek revenge. I seek responsibility. He turned slightly. You see a quiet child in a neat jacket and polished shoes. I see my legacy. I see every black child who has been told to wait, to prove, to explain themselves into acceptance. And I say enough. Noah looked up from his seat. He did not smile. He simply nodded. A moment passed. The kind of moment where something breaks, not loudly, but forever. Then, without announcement, the curtain behind them rustled. A man in a navy blazer entered the cabin. His ID badge was flipped backward. He walked calmly to Darius's row. He knelt beside him, quietly. Sir, the compliance stream is live. Command is observing. Press has been alerted outside. Legal is drafting response pathways. Darius nodded. Hold the position. Until we conclude, yes, sir. The man stood, walked back down the aisle. No one spoke to him. No one dared. In row 3, the livestream girl stared at her phone. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. I don't even know what to say anymore. He's not yelling. He's not even emotional. He's just still, and everyone else is moving around him like they forgot how to stand still. The viewer count hit 6,000. Back in seat 2A. Noah slowly reached into his bag. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, a drawing he had made 2 days before. Him and his dad on a plane, both in suits, both smiling. He didn't show anyone, but he held it in his hands, like it was proof that today was supposed to be good. Alyssa watched from the galley. Her chest ached. This was not what she signed up for when she joined North Continental. She wanted to travel. She wanted to help people. She didn't want to be the quiet witness to something broken. She stepped toward Tracy. We should say something. Tracy didn't answer. We were wrong. Still, no reply. Tracy stared at the documents on the tray, and for the first time in 10 years of flying, she felt afraid, not of punishment, but of being seen, really seen. Darius remained standing. Passengers watched him like a storm they had mistaken for clear skies, and for a moment, they understood. This flight was no longer about takeoff. It was about truth. The weight of the moment had settled over the cabin like thick fog. Darius Bennett stood in the front of first class, his presence commanding but not loud. The papers on the folding tray in front of him lay flat and still, untouched now, but everyone's eyes stayed on them. 3 documents, each one harmless on its own. Together, they held the power to stall a billion-dollar airline in its tracks. Row by row, passengers sat frozen, unsure what came next. Noah looked out the window. He didn't need to see his father to feel him. The calm, the steadiness, the way he made decisions that stuck. At school, his friends thought CEOs barked orders, wore flashy watches, made big scenes. But Noah knew different. His dad was not a loud man. He was a still man. And somehow, Stillness made more people nervous than shouting ever could. Darius reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small digital reader. It snapped to life in his hand. On its screen, a glowing signature confirmed ownership stake. ArcLight Capital Partners, majority stakeholder in North Continental's Northeast operations. Security clearance level 3. The captain had stepped back into the cockpit, not to fly, but to sit. He knew what was happening now, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. In the terminal, the jet bridge had been closed off. Security stood at both ends. A few passengers in the waiting area tried to peek through the glass, but the shades had been lowered. Something was happening inside that plane. They just could not see it, but they could feel it. In the gate office, Evelyn Grant received her 5th internal alert. Live flag. Audit propagation initiated. Regional HR compliance received notice. CEO access point confirmed. Her throat tightened. She typed quickly into her console. Who is on board 441? A pause. Then a single line returned. Darius E. Bennett, Chairman, ArcLight Capital. She stared at the screen. A younger agent leaned over her shoulder. Is that who I think it is? Yes, she said quietly. That's the man who helped restructure 2 ports, 3 telecom lines, and the entire Mid-Atlantic Railway merger. Back on the plane, the girl in row 3 whispered into her stream again. This is not just viral content anymore. This feels like history. You know what I mean. Her voice shook slightly. Her view count crossed 8,000. Darius tapped the screen again. The image on the cabin monitor changed. Now it displayed a live map. Highlighted flights. Routes connected to North Continental's Northeast and Midwest corridors. In the lower corner, a new icon appeared. Discrimination incident. Flagged in flight. It blinked, red, then yellow, then turned to a steady white. The internal escalation protocol had begun. Tracy Halston stared at the screen. She didn't move. Alyssa stood beside her, lips parted slightly. They weren't just watching a man take a stand. They were watching a system turn itself inside out. Darius finally spoke again. For too long, small moments like this have been dismissed as misunderstandings. He looked at the flight crew, then at the camera embedded in the wall above the galley. But they are not small to the people who experience them. They are the difference between safety and shame, between being seen and being erased. His voice never rose. That was the part that landed hardest. Every word weighed more because it did not need volume. He turned to the document with the embossed seal. This page outlines the conditions under which Clause 17.6 becomes active. It requires one primary condition: the unjust removal of a passenger under the age of 18, without full verification of identity, due process, or policy escalation, particularly when the action is influenced by race, age, or assumption. He paused. My son was removed from a seat he was assigned, after showing a valid boarding pass, based on nothing more than how he looked. There was no verification, there was no due process, and there was plenty of assumption. In seat 1C, an older woman lowered her glasses. She looked at Noah for the first time. Not as a disruption, not as a delay, but as a boy who had not raised his voice once, a boy who had simply said, "Yes, ma'am. I printed it myself." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes filled with something close to regret. Noah felt her gaze, but did not turn. He just continued to watch the tarmac. The workers outside had gone still again. The runway lights blinked slowly in the twilight. Darius tapped the third document. This is the accountability index created 3 years ago after a similar incident involving my colleague's daughter on a separate airline. It was designed to track systemic bias in real time. It has recorded 38 instances of seating-based conflict involving minors in the past fiscal year. 29 involved children of color. 18 were dismissed without investigation. 7 were labeled clerical error, and 0 resulted in retraining or accountability. Until now, the cabin was silent. Even the girl live streaming had gone still. Her phone lay flat on her tray now. She was not performing anymore. She was witnessing. Darius closed the folder slowly, then looked around the cabin. This is not a press stunt. This is not a viral moment. This is a mirror, and whether you choose to look into it is no longer my responsibility. It is yours. He returned to seat 2B. Noah didn't say anything, but the way he looked at his father said everything. Back at the gate, Evelyn Grant read the final line of the alert stream. Escalation accepted. Operation suspended. Compliance en route. Inside the aircraft. The lights dimmed for the first time in over an hour. Not to prepare for takeoff, but to prepare for something else. Something overdue. The lights in the cabin did not feel warm anymore. They were the same shade of soft white they had been at boarding. But now, beneath them, the atmosphere felt exposed. Every surface, every eye, every silence had weight. Captain Mitchell Crane stared at the monitor in front of him. The message blinking red across the center screen was not something he had ever seen during a pre-flight checklist. Governance Override Clause 17.6 Activated, hold position, compliance liaison inbound. He had flown across continents, through lightning, through crosswinds over Denver, but this message was different. This wasn't turbulence in the sky. This was turbulence in the system. He reached for his headset. Operations. This is Flight 441. Can you confirm full protocol activation? The voice that returned was clipped and deliberate. Confirmed. This aircraft is now operating under executive oversight. Cabin feeds are live. Voice logs recorded. Continue to cooperate. Captain Crane sat back. The control panel no longer felt like his. He was still at the helm, but the flight was no longer under his command. In the cabin, Tracy Halston leaned against the galley wall. Her hands clenched behind her back. Her spine remained straight. But inside, something was unraveling. She had told herself it was policy, that she was following procedure. But the image on the monitor, the red alert, the legal code, it was too much to ignore now. She turned to Alyssa, voice lower than before. Is this really happening? Alyssa did not answer right away. She was watching seat 2A, watching Noah. The boy had not moved. He hadn't looked up, but his stillness had a gravity of its own. It was not fear. It was history folding itself into one small pair of shoulders. I think it is, Alyssa said, and I think it has been happening for a long time. We just finally got caught. The girl in row 3 pulled her hoodie tighter around her head. Her phone was still streaming. Over 9,000 people were now watching. But she wasn't narrating anymore. She was listening. She whispered only once. He said, "This is a mirror, and I feel like it's pointed at all of us." At the front of the plane, Darius Bennett opened his tablet again. A new feed had appeared. Live Incident Panel. System report for North Continental Airlines. He tapped into it. It showed a cascade of responses. 4 regional offices flagged. HR escalation underway. Legal branch alerted. Compliance liaison ETA 6 minutes. Another line appeared. Flight crew real-time audit pending. He looked at the name on the screen. Tracy Halston. He closed the screen gently. No rush. Back in 2A. Noah reached into the side pocket of his backpack. He pulled out a small pack of gum. His fingers were slower than usual. Not nervous, just thoughtful. He unwrapped a piece and held it for a moment before placing it in his mouth. He didn't chew right away. Instead, he glanced at the folded drawing in his bag, the one with him and his dad, both smiling. The flight attendant had told him earlier that this seat wasn't for people like him, but now the entire plane was learning that it was, and that it always should have been. Alyssa approached slowly. She knelt beside Noah's seat. "Hey there, can I get you anything to drink?" Noah blinked, then nodded once. "Water, please." She returned a moment later with a cold bottle, handed it to him gently. No questions, no hesitation, no conditions, just care. Tracy watched it happen, watched a younger attendant do the job the way it should have been done. And for the first time, the ache in her chest was not from fear of consequence. It was from the understanding that she had failed to see a child. Darius remained seated but alert. His phone buzzed once. A single word message appeared. Confirmed. He typed back, "Effective now." Outside the aircraft. The jet bridge door hissed open. A man in a slate gray suit stepped aboard. No airline badge, just a discreet pin on his lapel. He moved with assurance, not the kind born from ego, but from purpose. He stopped near the cockpit. Captain Crane stood to greet him. The man held up a hand. "No need. I am here under Arclight authority. I'll brief you shortly." He moved down the aisle. Passengers watched as he paused by Darius's seat. "Mr. Bennett, full chain has activated. The board has acknowledged your escalation. You now have temporary governance over Flight 441 under shareholder rights." Darius nodded once. "Understood." A pause. "Would you like the crew rotation to begin?" Darius looked toward the galley. Tracy stood frozen. "Yes," he said softly. "Begin now." The liaison turned toward Alyssa and nodded. She retrieved the crew tablet from its magnetic dock and tapped twice. A screen lit up. 2 codes entered. FC1 offline. FA2 reassigned. Tracy's name disappeared from the crew manifest. The plane did not cheer. No one clapped. But something in the air shifted. A kind of silent justice. She stepped back, did not speak, did not protest. She simply walked down the aisle and sat in the last row of first class. Her hands folded, her face pale. Darius looked once toward her, then away. In the gate office, Evelyn Grant received the update. Flight 441 live personnel deactivation confirmed. She let out a slow breath. The overhead cabin lights blinked once. A system notification appeared on every screen. "This flight is operating under direct executive governance. Please remain seated." The passengers obeyed, not because of fear, but because they had seen what it meant when stillness met structure, when power did not shout, but simply showed up and stayed. Noah looked at his dad. "Are we going to fly soon?" Darius looked at the screen. The answer was close. "Soon," he said, "but not until the sky learns who belongs in every seat." The plane had not moved in over 90 minutes. Gate 14 remained sealed. The tarmac outside reflected pale runway lights against the darkening sky. Inside the cabin of Flight 441, everything was still, except for the occasional chime from internal systems and the slow blinking of the seatbelt signs that had never truly come on. Passengers did not shift impatiently anymore. They sat in silence, not out of boredom, not out of inconvenience, but because something real was unfolding in front of them, and they knew better than to look away. Noah sat quietly in seat Taoe. His water bottle rested on the tray table. He had not spoken in a while. He had not cried either. Instead, he stared down at his drawing again. The one with the plane. The one where he and his dad sat side by side in the sky. In the drawing, everyone was smiling, even the flight attendants. He looked at the drawing for a long time, then slowly folded it again and returned it to his bag. It was not ruined, just different now. Behind him, the passengers in rows 1 through 3 whispered occasionally, but the whispers had changed. They were no longer about the inconvenience. They were about the moment, the weight of it, the accountability of it. A man in 1D leaned over to the woman beside him. Did he say his firm owns a quarter of the airline? The woman nodded. I looked it up. ArcLight Capital. They manage more infrastructure than the state of Connecticut. They both fell silent again. Near the galley. Alyssa Reed quietly updated the crew log. Tracy's name was already archived. The manifest had changed. A new attendant from the rear cabin had stepped forward, replacing her without a word. No drama, just system update. The governance liaison remained seated in 1A, tablet in hand, overseeing the review. Every few minutes he tapped the screen and read the incoming audit flags. The screen behind him showed a slow scroll of internal policy articles and incident reports. Nothing dramatic, just quiet exposure. Everything that used to happen in the dark was now playing out in the light, in the cockpit. Captain Crane adjusted his collar. The engines remained off. There was no pushback signal from the gate. He had not touched the throttle in almost an hour. He stared at the blinking red banner at the top of the control panel. Do not depart. Audit in progress. He turned to his co-pilot. Think they'll let us fly this road again? The co-pilot did not answer. In the cabin, the girl in row 3 finally spoke into her phone again. 10,000 people are watching now. Her voice was no longer casual. This isn't like a normal viral moment. What's not funny? It's not a gotcha. It's just change. A message appeared on her screen. They grounded a flight over this, she replied softly. No. They grounded it to unground a truth. At the front of first class. Darius Bennett remained in seat 2B. His arms were folded. His eyes were focused on the screen in front of him. Another notification appeared. New directive. All regional flights connected to Flight 441 placed under review. Bias complaints reclassified for open audit. He tapped once. Confirmed. Then he reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a smaller card. It looked like an ID badge but carried no picture. Just his name and an internal shareholder serial. He stared at it, then placed it gently on the tray table. Beside him, Noah turned his head. Are we still in the air? Darius smiled faintly. We are still on the ground, but something bigger is in the air. Noah thought about that for a moment. Does it mean we're in trouble? Not us, then. Who the system? Darius said it calmly. Like he was saying, the sky was blue. Back in the gate office, Evelyn Grant received another internal ping. Reopen all closed complaints involving minor seating incidents in last 12 months. Begin reprocessing within 72 hours. The list attached to the message had 32 names. She exhaled. Across the country, in 4 regional offices. Similar notifications appeared. A training coordinator in Los Angeles spilled her coffee when she saw the alert. A policy manager in Boston whispered to no one, We're being flipped on the plane. Noah leaned his head back against the seat. He closed his eyes for just a second. He was tired, but not from the waiting, from holding in so much without saying a word. Darius watched him. You can rest if you want. Noah shook his head. Not yet. A few rows back. A young father traveling alone with his daughter watched them. He hadn't said anything since boarding. But now, seeing Noah, he tapped the small hand beside him. "That's what showing up looks like," he whispered. His daughter looked at him. "He's not yelling. He doesn't have to." The cabin lights dimmed slightly again. Another message blinked across the top display. Executive Oversight Phase 2 activated. Crew reassignment confirmed. Passenger statement request incoming. The governance liaison stood and approached Darius. "Sir, legal is requesting a closing statement for internal records. You can record audio or file text." Darius looked at his son, then back at the liaison. "Audio is fine." The liaison tapped his screen. A soft tone beeped. Recording started. Darius spoke into the cabin mic. "This is Darius Bennett, executive shareholder of ArcLight Capital Partners. On this flight, my son was removed from a seat he paid for, in a cabin he was allowed to be in, not because of his actions, but because of how he looked." He paused. The crew did not ask questions. They did not verify. They acted on assumption. But this is not about a single attendant or one boy. This is about culture. And today, we are rewriting it. He tapped the screen. "Recording complete." The liaison nodded. "That's all we need for now." Darius turned to Noah again. "You okay?" Noah nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll treat the next kid better?" Darius did not answer right away. He reached over, took his ID badge from the tray, and handed it to Noah. "That depends," he said, "on whether we stop here or keep going." Noah held the card in his hand. For the first time since boarding, he smiled. Just a little. But it was real. And it stayed. The plane had become so quiet. Even the smallest movements felt loud. A zipper, a shift in a seat, the hum of a phone screen being dimmed. They were the only sounds now. And still. Noah Bennett hadn't cried. Not when the flight attendant took his boarding pass. Not when she questioned if it was really his. Not even when she told him the seat wasn't meant for people like him. He had swallowed all of it. Sat there, still, small, silent, but not broken. Now he sat in seat 2A again, water bottle nearly empty, hands resting on the armrests like he had to remember they belonged there. His backpack was tucked neatly beneath his seat, just as it had been when he first arrived. The difference was that now the world knew it should stay there. Across the aisle, a woman in a gray cardigan finally leaned toward him. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Hi, sweetheart. I just want you to know. I saw what happened, and you handled yourself with a lot of grace." Noah looked at her. "Thank you, ma'am." She blinked at the formality in his voice. Not forced, just natural, like it had been practiced, like he had needed it before. She leaned back into her seat, unsure why that made her chest ache. In the cockpit, Captain Crane checked the time. Flight 441 was now delayed by nearly 2 hours. Dispatch had already cleared another aircraft for the Portland route. They would send it empty if they had to, because this one was no longer just a flight. It was a case file, and it was still open. Beside him, the co-pilot finally spoke. "He hasn't cried. Not once." The captain glanced back at the cabin door. Some kids learn early that crying doesn't help. In the cabin, Darius Bennett reviewed the latest screen update from ArcLight's internal equity dashboard. The numbers were updating in real time. Flagged incident reports, reopened case files, crew reassessment notices. One corner of the screen listed projected media impact. He ignored that section. He wasn't doing this for press, or headlines, or trend charts. He was doing it because of Seat 2A, because his son was in it, and because he shouldn't have to be a CEO for his child to be treated with respect. Noah reached for the window shade, slowly, He pulled it down halfway. The tarmac lights blurred against the plastic. Dad, yes. Do you think she meant to hurt me? Darius exhaled. I think she didn't think at all. Is that worse? Sometimes Noah turned back toward the front. I didn't cry. I know. But I kind of wanted to. That's okay. Darius leaned in closer. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to feel angry, or sad, or tired. You don't have to hold it all in just to be strong. I know. I just didn't want to make it worse. You didn't. Noah looked at him. Did I do the right thing? You did everything right. Darius reached out and gently rested his hand on his son's shoulder. Sometimes not crying is strength, and sometimes crying is too. Either way, what matters is knowing you didn't do anything wrong. Noah nodded. A single tear slipped down his cheek, and this time, he let it. Alyssa Reed, the only remaining active attendant in first class, noticed the moment. She didn't say anything. She simply reached for a napkin and walked it over, placing it on the tray table beside him without interrupting. She returned to the galley. No one asked her to do it. She just did. In row 3, the girl with the live stream turned off her camera. She looked down at her screen. 11,000 people had tuned in before she ended it, but something about watching the boy wipe his cheek without shame made her feel like she needed to log off. Not because the story was over, but because she had witnessed enough. Now it was time to think, and maybe change. Noah folded the napkin and placed it neatly beside his bag. He had only used one corner of it. In the gate office, Evelyn Grant received a new internal ping. Passenger Bennett, N. Statement requested for board records. Child minor protocol, optional verbal or written log. She looked at the request for a long time, then typed back. Leave it to guardian discretion. On board. Darius glanced at his tablet. He saw the same prompt. He looked at his son. You don't have to. I want to. Darius turned the screen toward Noah. The recorder lit up. You ready? Noah took a breath. Yes. He tapped once. The light blinked. Then Noah spoke. My name is Noah Bennett. I am 11 years old. Today I flew from Charlotte to Portland. I had a seat in first class. 2A. I had my boarding pass. I followed every rule. I said yes, ma'am. I wore the blazer my dad picked out. I didn't do anything wrong, but I got told I wasn't supposed to be here, that this seat wasn't for me, that I had to move. Noah paused. I didn't cry then. I just felt small. But now I'm back in my seat, and I know I belong here. Not because my dad owns a company, but because I'm a person, and every person deserves a seat. The recorder blinked once. Recording saved. Darius did not say anything. He just closed the screen gently and placed it back in his case. He reached for his son's hand and gave it a quiet squeeze. In the terminal, another agent watching the feed wiped his eyes without realizing he had started crying. Back on the plane, Noah leaned against his seat, and this time, when he closed his eyes, he felt something settle in his chest. Not sadness, not fear, just peace. The kind that comes from telling the truth and knowing someone finally heard it. The cabin lights brightened slowly, as if the plane itself was waking up after holding its breath too long. For nearly 2 hours, Flight 4041 had not moved an inch. Not a single wheel turned, no engine revved. But now, subtle shifts signaled something was finally changing. The air vents pushed a little stronger. The light steadied. Even the hum beneath the floor deepened. In the cockpit, Captain Crane glanced at his control panel. The gate hold cleared. Crew reassignment complete. Governance override concluded. He turned to his co-pilot and exhaled through his nose. "Looks like we have our wings back." His co-pilot didn't speak, just nodded and started flipping switches like muscle memory was kicking in. They had flown hundreds of flights together, but none like this. Crane pressed the button for the crew intercom. "Prepare for pushback." Alyssa Reed heard the chime from the galley and looked up from her checklist. She nodded quietly and began walking the aisle. Passengers straightened their trays. Phones were silenced. No one reached for headphones. They all knew. This wasn't just a flight anymore. It was a turning point. In seat 2A. Noah sat up. His fingers brushed the folded drawing in his bag once again. This time he didn't pull it out. He didn't need to. He felt the truth of it now. What he drew before the flight wasn't some silly hope. It had been a premonition, one that was tested, but never erased. Darius sat beside him in 2B, hands folded in his lap, eyes steady on the center of the aisle. He wasn't thinking about shares or policy revisions. Not anymore. He was thinking about every child who had ever been asked to shrink themselves to fit someone else's comfort. And he was thinking about how many people had accepted it. Not today, not here, not ever again. The new flight attendant from the rear cabin approached quietly. She wore a fresh badge. Her eyes met Darius's for a moment. "Thank you, sir. For everything." He nodded once. "You're here because you belong here. Same as him." He tilted his head toward Noah. She smiled gently, then turned to finish pre-flight prep. In the back row of first class, Tracy Halston remained seated. She had not moved since her deactivation. No one had spoken to her. She stared at the floor, replaying her choices. She had thought of herself as firm, professional, by the book, but the truth was simpler. She had seen a young black boy in first class and decided he didn't belong there. Not consciously, maybe, but not unconsciously enough to excuse it either. Now, the cabin was moving forward without her. The engine rumbled softly as the jet bridge pulled away. In the gate office, Evelyn Grant stood near the glass. Arms crossed, the plane began to taxi. Her headset beeped. Final crew log received. Passenger reports logged. System reset begins now. She tapped her tablet screen once and whispered, "About time on board." The safety demonstration began, but it didn't sound the same. Not because the words were different, but because everyone was listening now. Actually listening. Noah leaned over to his dad. "It's starting." Darius looked at him. It always was. The nose of the aircraft turned slowly onto the runway. Noah looked out his window. Runway lights shimmered like stars laid flat. He could feel the engines vibrating below. He turned his head just slightly, enough to speak without looking away. "Do you think people will forget?" Darius shook his head. "Not this time. Because of you," Noah shrugged. "Because of us." The plane began to accelerate. The cabin pressed gently back into their seats. But this time, Noah didn't feel small. He felt grounded, even as they lifted off the ground. Across the aisle, the woman in the gray cardigan watched them. She didn't take out her book, didn't start a movie. She just watched. And when the plane reached cruising altitude, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Let this be the new altitude for all of us." In the back row. Tracy opened her crew-issued manual. She turned to the section labeled Passenger Conflict Resolution. She read every word slowly, like she was seeing it for the first time. The flight had reached 30,000 feet, but inside the cabin, a deeper ascent was happening. In row 3, the girl who had streamed most of the incident looked through her photos. She had dozens, but she didn't feel like posting them. Not right now. Some stories needed more time. Some truths needed space to settle. She opened her notes app, started typing. A thread, maybe, or maybe a letter. She wasn't sure yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She was going to start with the boy who didn't cry, and the father who didn't need to raise his voice. In 2A. Noah pressed his hand lightly against the window. The clouds outside stretched like layers of memory. He whispered so only he could hear. I stayed in my seat. I stayed in my seat, and they saw me. The hum of the engines had taken on a different meaning. Before, it was just background noise, the expected sound of travel, a cue that people were moving from one place to another. But now, at 35,000 feet, it felt like something else entirely, like the sound of perspective, like the sound of things settling into their proper shape. Darius Bennett sat quietly in 2B, watching his son lean into the window. Noah had barely moved since takeoff, but his stillness no longer felt like silence. It felt like presence, like purpose. You doing all right? Darius asked softly. Noah nodded without turning away from the clouds. Better up here. Yeah, it usually is. They let a moment pass. The seatbelt sign blinked off with a soft chime. Passengers began shifting again, slowly testing the new air in the cabin. A few stood to stretch. One or two looked at their phones. But the tension from earlier still hung like a fog that hadn't quite lifted. In the rear galley, Alyssa Reed reviewed her cart quietly. She had memorized every item, every seat request, every face. But this flight was no longer about routine. It was about redemption. She took a breath and started down the aisle. In the last row of first class, Tracy Halston sat with her hands clasped together. The service tablet was gone from her hands, the badge removed. She had no duty now, no authority, only reflection. She looked around at the passengers she once served with practiced detachment. Now, she saw their eyes differently. She saw questions. She saw expectations. And in a few of them, she saw disappointment. But the hardest gaze to meet was her own. She reached into her purse and pulled out a notepad. Her hand trembled slightly as she began to write. I made a mistake today. No excuses. No uniform can cover that. I thought I was protecting a standard, but I was only protecting a bias. In 2A. Noah leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. The steady vibration of the plane beneath him gave him a strange sense of comfort. He imagined the flight path stretching ahead, like a ribbon being unrolled into the future. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to apologize for taking up space. Darius reached into his briefcase and pulled out a soft leather notebook. It wasn't for meetings, not for investors. This one was personal. Inside were letters he had written over the years, but never sent. He opened to a blank page and began to write. To the boy who stayed in his seat. You didn't have to raise your voice to prove your worth. You didn't have to fight to be heard. You just had to stay. And you did. In that stillness, you taught the sky something. That dignity is not something given. It's something owned. And you own it completely. He paused, then continued, You reminded me that sometimes the strongest act is to remain exactly where you are, no matter who tells you otherwise. Across the aisle, the woman in the gray cardigan quietly dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She didn't know what had moved her more, the boy's calm or the father's grace, but something about both made her want to be better. Behind them, a younger man opened his laptop and began drafting an email. To our HR team, we need to re-examine our onboarding process. This flight taught me something I never saw in any manual. And we're overdue. In row 3. The girl who had once live-streamed the chaos now sat with her knees pulled to her chest, listening to a playlist titled Quiet Strength. She had changed the name of it right there on the flight. The first song had no lyrics, just piano. That felt right, because sometimes words were too small for the weight they carried. The clouds outside the window began to shift as the sun dipped lower. Golden hues spread across the wing like light remembered something. Darius looked out and let the silence settle. He wasn't sure how this would ripple, if the board would issue a statement, if policies would actually change. But that was not the point. The point was that his son was seen, and that everyone else had seen him too. In the cockpit, Captain Crane received a brief communication from air traffic control. "You're clear through to Portland." "Thanks," he replied. Then he sat back in his seat. This would be his final flight for the company. He had already submitted his early retirement request 2 weeks ago, not because he was angry, but because he knew when it was time to let the next generation step in. Still, he was glad it had been this flight. It felt like closure. It felt like truth. Alyssa finished the final row in first class and paused to seat 2A. "Would you like anything else?" she asked Noah. He looked up at her. "Hot chocolate." Her smile spread instantly. "Coming right up." He turned back to the window. His hand drifted to the ID badge his father had given him earlier. He didn't clip it on, just held it, not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of what stillness could become when paired with courage. The plane continued east. No one would remember the gate number or the original flight time, but they would remember how it felt. To watch a boy take up space, to see a man guard that space without rage, to witness a system pause, and maybe, just maybe, begin to learn. The plane cruised steadily above the clouds. The sun had slipped below the horizon hours ago. Outside the window, stars had begun to prick the dark velvet sky. Inside the cabin, the quiet was different now, softer, lighter, but charged with something unspoken. Noah Bennett sat in seat 2A, his gaze distant but calm. He no longer felt small, no longer felt invisible. The events of the past hours had carved out space for him, not just on the plane, but in the world, beside him. Darius Bennett looked out at the night sky. His hands rested gently on the armrests. He was tired, but not defeated. In fact, he felt something he had not felt in years, hope. They had started this journey as just 2 passengers on Flight 441, but they had become symbols. Symbols of quiet strength, of dignity, of change. Darius reached over and squeezed Noah's hand lightly. "You were brave today." Noah glanced at him and smiled, the smallest curve of his lips but full of meaning. "I just stayed in my seat." That was enough. A soft murmur passed through the cabin as passengers settled in for the flight. Some whispered about what they had witnessed. Others simply stared out their windows, lost in thought. The woman in the gray cardigan from earlier pulled a small notebook from her bag. She scribbled something quickly before closing it with a sigh. Near the back, the former lead flight attendant, Tracy Halston, stared ahead. She was silent but thoughtful. The lessons of this flight would not be forgotten. Alyssa Reed moved calmly down the aisle, offering drinks and kindness where it was needed. She felt a quiet pride in being part of something larger than herself. The girl, who had streamed the entire ordeal, sat with her phone turned off, a soft smile playing on her lips. She had shared a story the world needed to hear. In the cockpit, Captain Mitchell Crane adjusted the controls, preparing for descent. His hands moved with practiced ease, but his mind lingered on the day's events. This flight would stay with him forever. Noah shifted in his seat and looked at the folded drawing tucked carefully inside his backpack. It was a simple picture, a boy and his father on a plane, both smiling. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ID badge his father had given him. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it, not the weight of power, but the weight of belonging. As the plane began its slow descent toward Portland, the cabin lights dimmed once more. Passengers buckled their seat belts, some exchanging quiet glances, sharing an unspoken bond forged in the skies. Darius turned to Noah. "What happens next is up to us." Noah nodded, his eyes steady. "We keep sitting, we keep standing, we keep speaking, and we never let anyone make us feel like we don't belong." The engines hummed steadily. The stars outside blinked patiently. The boy who stayed in his seat was no longer alone. He was part of something bigger, something lasting. A quiet revolution that started with a simple act of refusing to move. The plane touched down gently on the runway. A new chapter was just beginning. Noah's quiet refusal to leave his seat was more than a child's act of courage. It was a powerful statement against the daily, unspoken injustices faced by so many. And Darius Bennett's calm but unyielding response showed that change is possible when we confront discrimination not with anger, but with steady, informed action. This story reminds us that behind every unfair assumption is a real person deserving of respect and dignity. It challenges us to see beyond appearance, to listen beyond words, and to act when systems fail the people they serve. Thank you for joining us on this journey through a moment that shook an airline and echoed far beyond. If Noah's story moved you, if it stirred feelings of hope, frustration, or determination, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. There is more to come, stories that shine light on injustice and celebrate the quiet strength of those who refuse to be invisible. Stay with us, because together we can help change the narrative.